There we go.
Welcome into This Life Matters. Did I get you that, Dru?
Yeah, I like the way you did that. I'm Dru. This is GG. How you doing today, GG?
I'm doing well. This is GG, Georgine Dwyer, and on the other end of this camera is Andrew Morgan, and he's way out in Washington. I'm way over here in Oklahoma, and it's great that we can do this while we're still so far apart.
Yeah, it's because we love it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we've been having this series on the moral conflicts in our lives, and right smack dab in our faces, here comes another one that's here all the time, but it's in the news right now especially, which is gun violence, the loss of life, gun control issues, talk about mental health issues combined with that. So what's some of your thoughts about that, Dru? What's going on in the world today?
I think, when I listened to everything that happened in Florida and I watched it and I had a couple of really big takeaways. The first thing was I walked away a little bit angry at some of the pundits and some of the individuals who had the gall to really blame the community to some extent for what happened by saying you didn't identify or you didn't take advantage of some of the programs and systems that are in play once you identified that this person had a mental illness and was in your community. And for me, I feel like there's a time and a place where even if some of those statements have a truth behind it, that there were more that we could have done or that a group of people could do in a community, there's still a certain level of I don't know, koof. Like, I don't know what word to necessarily put on it, but I feel like it's distasteful to take someone who's in mourning and point the finger back at them. And then to take it a step further and to ignore some of the raw issues that are just out there, the real issues that are out there, and then say, okay, we're going to conveniently sweep it under this rug that you can't argue with. It's a mental illness. And that really got me emotionally charged. Had been a person who's worked around and cared for and loved individuals who really struggled with mental illnesses and did things to make sure that they had a solid mental health plan. And now and one of the reasons why so many people that I worked with struggled to even get a plan was because of the stigmas that are placed on individuals who are diagnosed with a mental illness. And this further perpetuates the ignorant stereotypes that a person with a mental illness isn't really actually walking in mental health. You can be diagnosed with something and still be going to your therapist, still taking your medicine, still doing everything that you need to do. And that's mental health to me. But to be villainized and demonized this way indirectly, it kind of frustrates me because, yeah, when these shooters do it, it may be the mental illness that helps spirit along. But when we quickly throw this out as the cover every single time a shooting happens, it makes it very hard for someone to accept that they may be struggling with that issue and to get treatment.
That is so true. And it seems like there's such on a continuum of depression versus, mildly depressed versus such depression and anxiety. And then on that other spectrum of paranoia, and some people are more cautious and some people are full out paranoid. And what causes all that? It's all not an illness, but people are afraid. And being in the mental health field for the majority of my working life, still having a private practice in Tulsa, it's disheartening because most of the time a lot of times people don't want somebody else to know that they're depressed or that they might need to talk to somebody. And the stigma of that, and what would that mean if somebody found out? Well, granted, we don't need to spread our personal details, boundaries again. We don't need to spread them out all over the world. We have a right to have our own personal health information kept confidential. But we know that sharing with other people is a way that we get the support and help that we need. Sometimes not just holding all that in and thinking, well, don't they know if they can see me, that I'm depressed or I'm unhappy or something's wrong? No, we can't read minds. We can read some behaviors and things like that, but it helps so much if somebody's struggling with any of this to actually speak with someone. And so yes, there's a long way to go. We've come a long way with being mentally healthy and thinking that it is healthy to get help, but there's still a long way to go with that. Part of the problem, though, Dru, I think, is with the insurance system. And I see in my own practice that most of the time, and up until very recently, all the time, behavioral health coverage is not the same as medical coverage. Sometimes you have two different deductibles for that. And or you have two different ways of being covered. The coverage could be different. That's not a fair, it's not playing fair to do that with people. So that's one of my biggest things, other than, the guns that are involved.
Yeah, and I think that's the bigger issue that we have to talk about, alongside the horrible stigma that's being put on dealing with mental health. I think before we go to the guns, to follow up my thought on what you said, is it's sad because we all lose here. As we begin to look at this idea that, okay, we've got to do more about mental health, they find more ways, I feel like, to tax us. They're going to find more ways to create these programs that may not necessarily benefit us directly, but it makes it look as though they're doing something for us. And so I feel like, unfortunately, this is going to still somehow come back and bite us as a people, as a society. Now, I'm saying that just out of a place of just maybe frustration right now. Not saying I've got any facts or anything bearing, like this says that that this will happen. But there is a history of those type of things happening where, when we demand that our politicians become reactionary, we tend to not get the desired result. It tends to be at a cost to us, to us as the people. But to go ahead and switch over to one of the main points when it comes to this, it is the factor that it's a shield, I feel, for not having serious discussions on gun control. And my answer, or my view on that, is simple. We can protest and we can march in the streets and we can do a lot of things. But you know what? One lobbyist going into a lunch meeting with a politician is going to yield more results than a million of us signing a petition or us marching for hours and days. That's
the reason that is, though, is because they're handing them contributions.
Exactly.
That's the whole reason, is the contributions that lobbyists that represent certain issues give a lot of money. That is the issue too, is some of the politicians vote the way they say they don't, but they do.
Yeah.
I know that.
Yeah.
And if they didn't have those kind of contributions, so we can. The other way is to write a check out, and if enough people write $25 or $50 or $100 checks out, and they're in a certain group, they get their voice heard too, which is, it's not right, but that is the way that it is, having worked in this field for a long time.
Yeah. If you're very frustrated right now with what's going on in America, that's it. This is the reason why the NRA you don't hear of them during the time when everyone's demanding gun control. Well, you would think you would hear from the biggest lobbyists for gun control at this point. They stay silent because they can. They've already written the check to stay silent. And it's a thing where across the board, everyone else who they've written checks to better stay silent if they want that check to continue to come. And so you can have a confidence when you know you've paid for something. If I know I paid for something, I can walk out the store with it clear and not worry about it. And how dare you ask me for my receipt, guy at the front at Walmart, like if I know I paid for it, I got it. And that's the attitude that the NRA and other gun lobbyists have at this point. They know that they've paid for the security of keeping keeping guns out in the streets the way that they are, accessible to individuals the way that they are. And so, that's the interesting thing. I think human nature says we don't want to fight politics with politics. It's a crooked and it's an ugly system that dictates to us that the only way to stop a lobbyist is to lobby alongside them. We wish there was another way of doing it, but is there?
But the other way of doing it is for people to actually run for those offices.
Boom. Yes.
Another way to do it. To be completely self-disclosed here, I mean, Dru, you probably don't have in your home.
No.
Okay. Well, GG does. Okay. I don't personally own any, but I want to say, we have guns in our home. My husband is a hunter. He's got a safe. It's in the garage. It's locked. There's several rifles or shotguns or whatever he uses. He duck hunts and he owns a pistol. Okay. So it's not that I'm against gun ownership, because I'm not.
Right.
But gun ownership for hunting or for in your home to defend yourself, if you know how to do it, that's one thing. And the Constitution says that we can, but the Supreme Court says we can own a firearm in our home to protect ourselves. That was down many years ago by the Supreme Court. It doesn't actually say you can conceal carry, you can have a gun anywhere you want. The law doesn't actually say that. So all the people that are carrying guns everywhere because they have a concealed carry permit, that's actually not the law of the land. So if that were actually, I don't know, don't get me going on that. Yeah. But the other thing is, in churches, people are carrying guns to church, and they do it because they have a concealed carry or they open carry, which is, they in their pocket or a holster or something. And I know that they do, and I know that big churches and small churches along designated people that have a gun, and if someone came in, they're the ones that are supposed to, react to it. And it's becoming more and more prevalent. And I know there's a church that is having a meeting about it soon to instruct all the parishioners that have guns to come to this meeting to find how they're supposed to react. Can you imagine sitting in church and somebody came in with a gun and all the people that had guns just got up and started firing them?
Yeah, I think and that's
it's sad.
Yeah, those are the worst case scenarios that I think, unfortunately, we're in a place now because we're so comfortable with letting hate have its place in our society that we're letting it win by basically moving around it. We're planting our gardens around hate instead of uprooting it. We're just saying, okay, the hate tree is here. We're just going to go ahead and live with it instead of doing the things to help an individual have peace and have a peace of mind and have a place around you where a person can come in and say, this is a place I can come for help. This isn't a place that I have to target. And the truth of the matter is, for me, I'm not anti-gun. Like, for me, I'll go to the gun range if I'm invited. I'll shoot guns. I don't have a problem with them for recreational purposes. You know what? If someone wants to go out and hunt, that's fine. You really don't need an assault rifle for that. If we're in a war situation, I feel like our soldiers need to be equipped with just, with what they need. So yeah. I believe that they all have their place in society, but they have to have their place in segments of society. Military weapons shouldn't be sold on the streets, because then what you're doing or what you're saying is there is a segment of the population that you want to kill in a quick fashion. And typically what has happened is those guns are being used in urban areas. And for me, that's where it's kind of a pause for me, where it's like, am I being, is the group of individuals that I care about and love the most, around me, are they being targeted? Will they possibly be affected by the use of those guns. So like I said, I'm not anti-gun at all. It's just a matter of there has to be a regulation on where and why and how they're being distributed in society. Because if you don't, then once again, it's where we are, where we're just happy with, we're just comfortable in a place where we let hate win and we let
Yeah,
this pain in.
I was looking at the news, I think it was yesterday, and there was a graph up about the number of uh, deaths by gun. And of course, the United States was just off the chart, whereas other industrialized countries are not. They're just very low. There's something intrinsically wrong with the way, the mindset about guns, apparently,
Yeah,
in America. And again, it goes back to the personal values of people, educating people, having intact families, and uh, making sure that people have jobs, that they don't have to do criminal activities, they can make an honest wage. So, but sometimes it does feel a little helpless and hopeless, doesn't it?
it does, and I think that that's the whole point. That it's like we can't stop having the discussion about the things that matter. Like whether it's through the avenue of crossing the table and talking to individuals you may not necessarily agree with to come to a meeting, but I think you have to understand you're crossing the table to meet someone, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily to impress upon the rest of society that things have to go this way. I'm not a supporter of guns because I've seen personally the pain that they cause. But on the
Mm-hmm.
same token, at some point in my life, I had to mature from the individual I was in my, let's say, mid to late 20s, where it was just no guns, to now in my mid to late 30s. 10 years later, my attitude is totally different. My attitude is that they have a place in society. A more mature look at it says, yeah, there could become a time in society where every individual needs to know how to use a gun. That's one of the reasons why I know how to use guns. There's very few guns I don't know how to use at this point because I've asked for training here and there in different aspects to learn. We all have to evolve and we all have to grow to a point where we recognize certain things don't have to just be completely eradicated. And I think the fear of legislation that will just completely wipe out guns is why a lot of people are okay with us never having the discussion. The problem is we don't want to stay silent and wait till the devil pokes us with his fork. Because that's when I don't want to wait till it hurts until it hits my front door for me to then yell in front of the lobbyists or yell in front of the politicians and say and demand change. I don't want my voice to be just completely discontinued because he's going through pain. I don't want it to be viewed as just he's mourning. No, I'm mourning right now even though I don't know any of the individuals affected. I'm mourning for the loss of my child's innocence. I'm mourning for the loss of my innocence in a country and a land where we should be free. And that's the part that gets me, that something as important and precious as mental health gets thrown under the bus to avoid having a tough conversation, to avoid changing our mind in a mature way, because every human being has to evolve. It's just a part of the design. Instead of us evolving as a society, we'd rather throw the book at something that affects every single one of us. I don't think that there's a human being out there that hasn't been touched or affected by mental illness in some way, shape, form, or fashion. But we'd rather throw that under the bus than to deal with this issue. It's dealable. Like, we can deal with this.
Yeah, we could. And you're right. Everybody has been affected in some way. Every single individual. They may not know it. There's something in each family though, that has been affected by that and by guns. And, we're taught all these words about, well, be proactive, be proactive about your marriage, be proactive about raising your children. Well, there's some things that need some change instead of being reactive to things.
Yeah, I definitely feel like that's the direction to go. And we all know that you can write your local politician and you could talk to them and you could write the checks, you can do whatever. I wouldn't discourage it. Like, keep doing that. Keep, if you've never written an email, if you've never called, like if you're one of those people who say, well, we can write, actually write them.
Yeah.
Actually do it. Actually stand up and talk about this issue, because the truth of the matter is I think a lot of lower level politicians that we could actually still reach, I believe that they feel the same way we feel. I believe that there's still a chance that we can reach a segment of people and affect their hearts. If we could prick the heart of a councilman right now who's on his way to a Senate seat or something of that nature, then maybe change can be affected. Don't make sure you never silence your voice on this, because you never know who's listening, who's going to be in a
And,
position of power later.
you know, everybody knows somebody.
Yeah.
There are people that know politicians. There are people you go to church with. There are people that you're in Boy Scouts with. There are people that you work with, um, or their brother is, or their sister. We do know people. There are neighbors. They are politicians. So I would encourage people to get involved in their county politics even. And,
Yeah.
because together our voices can be very powerful that can overwhelm some other things. So that's one thing I would recommend is for us to be proactive.
I think that one of the things that I heard an individual say was that there's going to be something good that's going to come from the current administration and our displeasure with them, and is that it may open up the doors to more realistic politicians. The first individual that we need that represents us. Um, this is typically happens after we have a politician with low approval ratings. We tend to find someone who's the total, like, polar opposite of that individual, and
Mm-hmm.
we end up seeing some sort of social change, if not some sort of radical legislative change, where things are just going to be different. But we tend to go to the extreme other direction, and so maybe from this we can be motivated by knowing that, you know what, if America is ripe and ready for real people to run, maybe some individuals who've got a little bit of a shady past, but a good heart now, who have repentive nature about themselves, who doesn't have, skeletons because of their transparency, maybe those will be the next generation of individuals that will stand up and help lead this nation. And maybe we'll start seeing that as a result of what's recently taken place. And I hope that that is the truth. I hope that there's an individual that may be listening right now that gets inspired to say, you know what, maybe this should be in my future. If I got a plan for my community, maybe I should run. If just running helps me put the ideas and plant seed to those listening, even if I don't win, maybe I can plant some seeds in the person I'm running against, or that will win, or maybe I can plant seeds in the community to get them going in a direction where they care on a deeper level. So um, I definitely would say get out there and vote, but then take it a step further. Throw your hat, and I'm not saying just everyone who's unqualified, but throw your hat in the ring, to participate in the revitalization of your community when they're having community meetings and they're saying things like, hey, we want to put this here. What do you guys think? We're having a town hall meeting. Don't skip it. Participate. Find out, what's going on around your way so that you can be more informed, and it helps you deal with this, because we've been talking about dealing with the daily, like, moral conflicts of life. And this is one that comes up now, unfortunately, in America. A mass shooting happens. The politicians say it's mental illness that we need to talk about. America says we need to talk about guns. And then we just get, and I've used this expression, unfortunately, one too many times, but it's the best way I can describe it. It doesn't sound pastoral, but we get pissed enough to miss the bus. That's it. And we find ourselves just walking in circles, not getting to the destination we can get to as a people. And so,
One of the things that I think needs a shout out is we've been talking about moral conflicts and moral dilemmas where you live. up north from you, though, the grandmother that discovered her grandson's journals and the guns and the bomb making materials and actually contacted the police, and that stopped a shooting. And that is the kind of moral courage that had to be so hard
Yeah.
on one level, a parent or a grandparent or a friend, um, a neighbor. We don't want to get into a society where we like turn in people because they, let their dog run or something. But really serious things. If we see that, we do need to do something about it. And that grandmother had a lot of courage and stopped something, because that person most likely would have done something.
Oh yeah, I mean all day. Like I love my children, but that's part of getting them help. If I had ever discovered that a child that I'm in their life and they were going that direction, it's my
Yeah.
responsibility to them. Not even thinking about society and everything else. And yeah, that's true. But when you care about someone, you get them the help necessary. And sometimes that's what grace looks like. That's what grace and mercy is about. It may not seem as romantic as we would want it to be, but sometimes that's the best way to affect change, is to make sure that you provoke the agents of change in that individual's life.
hmm
So, uh,
Now, you also want to talk about a movie that you've seen
yeah,
recently, and
well, yeah. Last night I went to go see Black Panther, and I suggest you go see it. It's a
yeah,
beautiful movie, beautiful, like visually beautiful. Like it's nothing like I've ever seen before in my life. Like um, it's emotionally jarring. Like it feels so good in my heart to be able to see it, and it's a fantasy, and it emotionally sends you to a place where when you walk, for me, when I walked out the theater, it's like, now back to this reality. And it is what it is, but the hope is that we can one day not emulate just a whole utopian black society, but emulate that in our communities as a whole. Like in each segment, whether it's whatever the hodgepodge, like whatever the mixture is, that we can develop these. And this is probably in the right, the proper English, but we can really create these ungentrifiable cities and these unpenetrable communities that have love as the centerpiece, that's just interwoven in every single thing that we do. And people, like on the outside looking in, doesn't understand why we're so strong. And it's because love is in the middle of everything. That love is the bond that can't be broken. If we ever can lock into that sense, it's so doable. Like there's a substance, or not, so there's a particular element that they use in the movie that makes the nation great. But I draw inspiration by saying, well, what raw resources is real that we do have? And when after watching it, I realized we have love, and we do have
we,
something.
the other thing, we be trying to understand each other.
Yeah,
And by doing that, we learn to appreciate the person. So this this thing about different colors of people, got to go away, because you know, as we've said before, I mean, if two people from different races decide they're going to have children, there's going to be, a different color of person, but it's understanding more the culture of every person. And even if you are, uh, you know, say for instance, African American culture in the North is probably different from African American culture in the Midwest and in the South and in Africa and in California. I mean, it's understanding the culture and where the person comes from and what they're about. That understanding actually leads, I think, to love.
yeah, yeah. You're absolutely right. That is a starting point. And for me, I just, like I said, visually, one of the best movies that um, I've seen in a long time. Right as I'm starting to talk, a bus just pulled up right next to me, so it's completely distracting me. But it's one of the best movies I've seen in a long time, and I would definitely suggest to anyone that you go out and you see this movie. I
Well,
think it's
tickets are sold
Yeah,
out.
I think this whole weekend, I think at best you may get President's Day, you might get a few matinee viewing openings or something like that. But so if you've got to wait till Monday, you wait till Monday or Sunday after church. But there will come a time and a point where you'll get a chance to see it, and it's worth you going and seeing and sitting and enjoying because it's a superhero story, but it does have a social message in it. And I know a lot of people want to avoid the social messages. And one of the things that was been so disheartening is the discouraging nature of social media where everyone has a right to their opinion, such as me and you.
Yeah.
And some people are choosing to take their opinion to throw hatred on African American on African culture in general and say, like I've seen a series of mean tweets where people have come out and said, well, black people repeat with me, repeat after me, Wakanda is not real. It's like we know that it's a fantasy, but why? Like there's a question my son asked me the other day that was the hit to the point of everything. He asked the question that James Baldwin asked, threw back at a lot of people was that was it necessary for America to have a Negro? Why was it necessary for slaves? Why was it necessary for us to be here? And there were so many different ways that I explained that to him from both a spiritual and from, my actual life experiences to help him understand it. But this is a reality that we have to deal with, that we have to learn what one another is going through. That's a question that my son's asking me because he is black and he wants to know why things have shaped out to be the way that they are. Why is there so much hatred? Why does there have to be a group of people that have to be the target of this hate? That's a question I'm more than happy to answer. My challenge is that we begin to review that question and ask that question, answer that question, or pose that question to our children, regardless if they ask it or not, so that they can start getting an understanding on why they can't continue to blindly pretend that certain social constructs don't exist. Because that's all racism is. It's not in my opinion, it's not a tangible thing that can kill you. It's a social construct that's set up to say, it says, hey, you should feel this way, this should be this way, but it's not based in reality. Like, I'm not anyone.
Next show, I think that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
If you grow up with certain ideas, whether they're cultural, religious, things about families, whatever it is, ideas, that this is the way it is.
Yeah.
And at some point in our lives, something happens and we come to a place that we have to decide about that. So what about that for next time?
That sounds perfect. And I think that's what we'll do because these are the discussions that matter in life. Our thing that we love to always point out is that our lives begin to end when we stop talking about the things that matter.
That's right.
And so that's one of the things that we have to talk about because there's a lot of things that we're starting to see just really divide our country, divide us as individuals, divide us from people that we know and love. And if our little conversation helps spearhead a conversation with just one family or one person, it's worth it. All right.
Okay. That sounds good. So thanks for listening, everybody. And we'll see you again next week on This Life Matters.